Hi, it's Lori. Welcome to my channel. In this video today, I'm going to edit a fall image, editing for color using both Lightroom and Photoshop. Let's get started. This image was taken in the Smoky Mountains and it was towards the end of the fall peak season. It was also on a very overcast, kind of cloudy day after some rainstorms had come through the area. So the colors did not show up as bright and a lot of the leaves had kind of lost their peak color. So I want to give this image a little bit of pop, just a tiny bit to really showcase the beauty of the fall season in the mountains. So to get started, the first thing I always do is I look at my histogram and I make sure that I have turned on my little highlight and shadow clipping, and I can see the highlights are a little blown there, so we're going to fix that. And to get started, I'm going to come down here in the basic panel, and I like to start with just making any small adjustments to the histogram, starting with my highlights, which I'm going to bring down, which will correct the blown out part there. So I'm going to bring those down just a little bit. I'm going to open up the shadows. There are quite a bit of shadows in here, and you can see as I open that up, it's just opening up this area. I'm just going to bring those open just a little bit more. And the whites and blacks are all the way stretched across. I don't see any reason to adjust those in this image. As far as exposure, I am going to darken the image just a little bit. I want to give it that mood that I think it really shows with this almost winter fall scene. So don't want it to be too bright. I'm not going to add any contrast right now because that will also darken the image, and what I want to do is really start working with my colors. So to do that, I'm going to jump down, and the first tendency would be to come down to the HSL panel and to begin moving your sliders. So we could enhance the orange, we can enhance the red, but these are global adjustments. And what that means is it's going to find any red tones. It could be in the logs, it could be down here, up in the trees, and it's going to adjust all of those colors. And a lot of times, what looks like maybe yellow actually has some orange tones in it. So if we grab our little adjusted tool right here, and we bring that over to like this yellow area, and as I slide it up or down, you can see the orange is also moving. So that's an example of how if we make those changes, it will impact other colors. So instead of making global adjustments to the color, I'm going to come up and use the mask tools. So the mask tools are up here in the upper right corner. It's the circle. You click on that, and I'm going to use color range. When you select color range, it's going to create your mask here, and you're just going to come over with your dropper, and now we can select a color. So I'm going to start with these leaves that are down in the bottom, and when I highlight that, we can see, and let me change the color so it's not green. You can click here and change your color. So let's just make it red since we know that's what we're working with. And we can now see where Lightroom has identified. So it's got a little bit of that up in the trees. Now we have an option. We can see the color range selected here, and we have refine. So we can reduce, you can see that's going away, or we can increase the amount of that color selection. So I'm going to increase it just a little bit. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to take off the show overlay, and I'm going to come down and first increase the saturation. So that's definitely making it pop a little, but I also want to change the hue. So I don't do this very often at all, but in this case, I want to give this more of that red orange, fall tone. So I'm going to just pop it just a little bit. So we can turn the eyeball off here to see before and after. Now, once you make those changes down here in the basic panel, you can still continue to refine. You can also grab your brush and subtract if you don't want it in certain areas. So we may do that as we continue editing this image. So now I'm going to add another color range, and I'm going to come in and select this yellow area. And we can see that that really selected a lot. Now, it's also down here. So what I'm going to do now is subtract this. I'm going to really refine it. I just want a little bit. We could also resample. So if you don't like what it selected, you can come back in and resample. So let's try maybe right here. That's better. So now I'm going to increase, and this is an example where I am going to use the subtract, and I'm going to select the brush. I'm going to make my brush pretty large using my bracket keys, and I'm going to make sure that there's nothing selected down here. Now we can also change our color again. This is a tricky image since we're working with colors. I'm going to make it blue so that I can really see where Lightroom has selected. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the color range, and let's increase that just a little. And now I'm going to come down and add some saturation that's really making that pop. And I could also modify the color. So if I want to give it more of that kind of orange tone, I could keep it yellow. I want to add just a little warmth to it. I could also use my temperature slider, and that's working nicely. So very small adjustments. You can see 29 on saturation, but just a -2 on hue. I just tweaked it just a little, and 14 just a little bit on temperature. So if I show you this mask, turning it off and turning it back on, you can really see the changes in this area where we applied the mask. Okay, so as I look at the greens and the other colors in the image, I think they are all fine. What I'd like to do now is open up the shadows on this log just a little bit. So I'm going to create a new mask, and I'm going to add a brush, make the brush smaller, and I'm just going to come in, just go along this area, and maybe make my brush bigger and just come along this side just a little bit. I'm just going to pop that exposure just a tiny bit. We can also open up the shadows, and that's going to make the biggest difference. Okay, so let's look at before on the log and the after. So it's just bringing the light there, opening up the shadows in this little area just a little bit. And then a last touch that I want to do is I'm going to go create a new mask, grab the brush, and I'm now going to highlight this water area. And what I want to do is just reduce the clarity to really smooth it out. And I may add just a touch of temperature to give it a little bit more blue hue, and maybe a touch of white. Yeah, to just brighten it a little bit. So this is going to be very subtle. If we do before, you can see it had a little bit more of that kind of green tone, and after, just a little bit of a blue hue there. You could also add a little dehaze if you wanted to make it even a little bit softer. All right, so that would be a really quick Lightroom edit. Can show you before and after. Very subtle changes, very natural, but just adding a color pop and opening up those shadows can be really nice. So I want to give you a more advanced way that you could edit this image. And so let's go back to our import. And with the import, I'm gonna step back to where we made our exposure adjustments. So the only adjustments that are on this part of the image are the highlights and the shadows that we opened. So now I'm going to right click on my mouse and do edit in Photoshop. So I want to show you a technique to edit your fall colors using Photoshop as well as the Lightroom process that we just reviewed. So we're going to open this image over in Photoshop. And the first thing that I always like to do is Command J or Control J to duplicate the background layer. Now from here we have a couple options to edit the colors in this image. The first option that I'm going to show you is using selective color. So you can come down to your adjustments and we can select selective color. From here we've got our colors that we can make adjustments to. So I'm going to start with red, and with red I want to see what it does when I increase the magenta there. So we can see already that's popping. And I'm also going to bring the blacks down a little bit. And let's see if we adding some yellow isn't doing very much. This is where I just kind of experiment with it. And on the cyan, yeah, if we reduce the cyan, it's giving us a little bit brighter magenta color. Let's go to our yellows, and I'm going to enhance those. And you can see that's overboard. So we just want to do a tiny amount. And then for magenta, you can come in and see how that could really change our image if you wanted to do something kind of fun. We're just going to give the magenta just a tiny punch there. And again, with cyan, if we remove it, look how that brings out the orange colors. Again, we're just going to do a tiny bit of that. All right, now we can go to our green channel, and we can also play with the magentas. You can see how that will brighten the green or reduce. Magenta is the opposite of green, and so you can see how that can change that a little bit. Again, I want to play with the cyan. You can give it a little more blue tones or a little bit lighter. I like the little bit of blue. It gives it a little more of a winter look. So that's just a quick way to use selective color. It really, you can do it without then masking. So if for some reason you only use Photoshop to edit, selective color is a nice way to make some adjustments. All right, so I'm going to delete that, and I want to show you, I'm going to delete our first layer. I'm going to show you an advanced way to also impact color and add depth to an image like this. So we're going to go up to image mode, and we're going to change our color mode to LAB color. Now, this is a color mode that has a larger color gamut. It's one of the absolute largest. So it's got a lot more colors available that we can work with. So now that it's converted, we're going to do a curves adjustment. And when you select the curves, it's going to pop up lightness. And what we want to do is we want to go to the A channel first. So right here in the A channel, we are going to take the bottom, the blacks and the shadows of our image. We're going to slide it over, and let's go to about -95. Now it's going to make the image look strange. This is obviously the green channel. We're going to come up to the top in the highlights and whites, and we're going to go over there about the same amount. So let's get over to about 94, and you can see our image is back the way it was. Now we're going to go to our B channel, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to come over, so this is obviously the blues, about 94. It doesn't have to be exact, and we're going to go up to the top. This is going to be our yellows, and we're going to go to that 94 type range. Maybe a little bit less on that. There we go. Okay, and then we can go to the lightness channel, and sometimes you can play with that just to see. It's going to add some definite depth to your image, so you may want to, you don't always have to do that, but you want to adjust the top and the bottom if you choose to do it. All right, so I'm going to show you now before, pretty flat, dull looking kind of image, and after using that LAB color. It's just brought out a lot of the colors with a couple quick adjustments. Now, it did not add the red tones that we did in Lightroom, but it's really just giving us our natural image with a little bit of just that pop of warmth and those color tones. So now what we want to do is go back to image mode, and we're going to take it back to RGB color mode, which is what we need the image to be in. You want to be sure you select flatten. So we're going to select flatten, and what that's going to do is flatten our layers, and it is going to merge these two together and take us back to a background image with the changes that LAB color mode provided. Now, if you only use Photoshop, be sure that you have saved your original image in your file somewhere, because once you make that conversion, you now have a new background layer. It does not give you the option to create a layer on top. using that color mode. You have to flatten the image to save your work there. So I hope that as you're out shooting in the beautiful season of fall, that you will think about how to tweak your colors using either mask in Lightroom, color adjustments, maybe selective color, or trying lab color mode to really bring out some beautiful tones this fall season.